Okay, so we can go ahead and begin. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Zaid Bogrami. I'm a R3 at Columbia. And today we're going to be hearing from three members of the RAD Middle East chapter. They're going to tell us about their really incredible work at the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan, which is a Syrian refugee camp. I'll quickly introduce the speakers, and then they'll share a presentation with us, and any other details that they'd like to share, and then we can do a Q&A afterwards. So we can go ahead and begin. So first is Dr. Malik Basha. He's a neuroradiologist currently practicing in Indiana, and he's a program director of the RAD Jordan chapter. He completed his MD from Wayne State University, radiology residency from UNC, and his neuroradiology fellowship from Johns Hopkins. Under his leadership, volunteers have gone on several missions to the Zaatari refugee camp in collaboration with the Syrian American Medical Society. And then next we have Amona Hatoum. She's a sonographer originally from Calgary, Canada. She has over a decade of experience in acute care and has worked abroad in Qatar and the UAE. She currently does outpatient work locally in Canada and is also a program manager for the RAD Middle East chapter. And last but not least, we have Dr. Scott Weidman. He's a second-year neuroradiology fellow at Johns Hopkins University. So he's been involved with RAD for many years and has worked to improve radiology services in Peru, Guyana, and low-resource settings within the United States. Prior to his neuroradiology fellowship, he did his MD and radiology residency from Columbia, and in fact was my senior resident. When I was a baby R1, he was an R4, and we did RAD talks together. We did RAD case conferences together for residents in Guyana. And so we've come full circle, and we again find ourselves today doing another RAD talk, hopefully one of many collaborations for the future. So with that, I'll give you guys the floor. You guys can share your presentation and begin.
Okay, screen. Let me just start broadcast. All right, Zaid, just getting this set up. Okay, can everyone see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so yeah, in the beginning of this year in January, we got to go to the Zaatari refugee camp. So a bit of the outline here. So we're going to talk about the background of Jordan, the SAMS-RAD relationship, some info on the Zaatari camp, RAD involvement, and the Hashemite workshop. So just a little blurb here on global health and radiology. So according to the WHO, approximately 3 to 4 billion people are at risk for widespread losses and deaths that could be avoided or treated if radiology were available. All right, so Jordan is an independent kingdom. The largest and capital city there is Amman, with a population of about 12 million people. And the official languages there were Arabic. English was widely used. So a little bit on where Jordan is. So it lays to the south of Syria, to the east of Saudi Arabia, and to the, east of Palestine and to the west of Saudi Arabia. Malik, did you want to do the slide?
Sure, absolutely. The organization I work with is SAMS, the Syrian American Medical Society. It's quite a large nonprofit organization. They're non-political. They're just focused on providing aid, medical aid. And we established this relationship this was several years ago, back in 2018 or so. And they conduct multiple missions, medical missions throughout refugee camps in the Middle East. The biggest ones are in Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, where most of the Syrian refugees are. And they make usually nowadays it's been about 3 trips a year to Jordan, sometimes 4. Typically these missions last a little bit, around a week or so, and they focused on mostly on the refugee camp at Zaatari in Jordan. And they really organize everything that we do. They handle housing, they handle food, they handle transportation, and they run a clinic within the camp. I guess we'll talk about that more in a little bit.
Yeah, so as Manik was saying, SAMS is great because they handle the logistics such as your airport pickup, which is nice, safe transportation from the airport to the hotel that we were staying at. And then every day we had buses taking different people to different parts of Jordan. So that's me and Scott going from Amman to the Zaatari camp, which if you see on the map, it's about an hour to an hour and a half drive from Amman. This is just a picture of the overview of the Zaatari camp. You can see how massive in size it is. And then a little bit of the origin story. So about 10 years ago, about 450 Syrians were fleeing Syria just in looks of safety. And till now, the camp houses about 80,000 refugees, making it one of the largest refugee camps in the world and a symbol of the ongoing Syrian refugee crisis. So some stats, about 1/3 of the households there are led by women. Families survive on about a monthly stipend of $32, and over half of the population in the camp are children under the age of 18. So this is just a picture outside of the camp of me, Scott, and then some Jordanian medical students that were volunteering and helping us during our mission. So some of the services that were offered in the clinic was dermatology, dental, cardiology, and of course, radiology. So this was the ultrasound room. So as you can see, just a very basic room with a bed, and we had an ultrasound machine there with a couple cameras. And this is again some of the volunteers. It was nice having the volunteers because they helped a lot with translation. I myself speak Arabic, but even so, the Jordanian dialect is a little bit different. So it was nice. And then Scott, of course, speaks English. So it was helpful having them around for us. Some things that we saw there, a lot of patients with gallstones, some were known cases, others were new. We did have an acute appendicitis case come through the day we were there. There was a case of a possible ovarian torsion. We saw a lot of hernias, a lot of kidney stones, and then just miscellaneous lumps, bumps, problems that people had had for a long time, just waiting to be seen by any kind of radiology service. So on our last day, we had a 16-year-old boy come into the clinic, just holding his right side and a lot of pain. Luckily, we were there and we had ultrasound. So we had a look at him. We saw he had an acute appendicitis, which was nice. We were able to diagnose him on the spot with Scott being there, the radiologist. And we sent him off and he ended up having surgery after this. This was a premenarchal young girl. She'd had pain on and off for months. She came in, she had a very enlarged ovary. We were questioning possible torsion or detorsion. And with her, we recommended further imaging just to be able to diagnose on site. There is an MRI or CT. So our hands were kind of tied with these kind of cases. We could do the ultrasound, but after that, they had to go outside and be able to get further imaging to assess. Scott, did you want to do this slide?
Absolutely. So some of the challenges that we faced, so with any global health or limited resource setting, I feel like the challenges are going to be pretty universal, and our experience was no different. So one of the challenges was trying to figure out what the best workflow would be for providing care for the camp. The SAMS organizes 4 trips per year to Zaatari, and each of those trips are staffed depending on whoever signs up for the trip. And so for the last few trips leading up to our trip, no radiologist had been at the camp. And so we got a nice general onboarding session that was applicable to the entire camp and just kind of what to expect in terms of how to get there and a general overview of the workflow. But, you know, for more detailed workflow problems, we just had to troubleshoot. And luckily, you know, these trips are well staffed with a ton of volunteers, like Mona was saying. And so having assistance from Jordanian medical students was very helpful in terms of some of the like auxiliary work, like triaging patients or helping to get a patient history, stuff like that. So that went a long way with coming up with an appropriate workflow. Other challenges we faced were unclear exam indications. A lot of patients came in with problems that they already knew about, or problems that had been followed for a few months to years. And the medical record system it's literally just a tiny little booklet with a couple lines for the provider to write in, you know, the patient's history. So a lot of patients that came in were it took a little bit of digging in order to figure out, you know, what question they were trying to have answered. Um, so so yeah, having Arabic speakers was very helpful. And you know, this is my first trip to the Middle East. I'm not an Arabic speaker. And so again, Jordanian medical students and Mona were super helpful with patient histories. Other challenges we saw were yeah, just like problems that you'd expect in a resource poor setting. So we didn't have access to like if the patient needed a CAT scan, they didn't have a CAT scan available within the camp. So uh, for a patient or two, I think we tried to write a referral for them to go get a CAT scan outside of the camp, but you know that was kind of out of our hands, as was a lot of the patient navigation stuff. Luckily, there's someone that lives within the camp that he's essentially a patient navigator, and so we actually didn't find out, you know, what his role was until we were at Zatri, I think for 3 days, I want to say, and we didn't find out that this guy was there until latter half of the second day. But he was really helpful in terms of arranging for follow-up imaging at either different sites within the camp or outside of the camp. So once we connected with him, patient navigation became much less of an issue. But yeah, so some of the successes with our trip, you know, like I said, we quickly adapted to our environment, and that was in large part because of a ton of volunteer support. Um, and yeah, we just tried to make some form of organization out of the chaos.
All right. So here's just a picture on the last day with some of the, so it was a mixture. It was us, volunteers, medical students, interns, and then of course some of the children in the camp. So part 2 of our trip was a very interesting, and we really enjoyed our time doing this. So it was basically a university workshop at the Hashemite Hospital / University. This was organized by Dr. Abdullah Shaheen, who is also a SAMS affiliate, who completed his medical school in Jordan, and now he is practicing in Chicago. So he did a 1-hour lecture introducing POCUS ultrasound, and then we did a hands-on workshop, which had 3 separate stations. We had them practicing basically cardiac views, the FAST exam, and a vascular exam. So some of the medical students here. So yeah, they got their hands on the probes, taught them kind of, you know, imaging orientation, how to spot free fluid in the abdomen, basically things that you'd want to know if you're doing bedside emerge ultrasound. So yeah, they really enjoyed that. It was well received. We got pretty good feedback. We got requests for more future workshops, which we're looking forward to doing. And we did this over 2 days. We taught 120 medical students. And these are just some of the workshop coordinators. They got us mensa for lunch, which was really sweet, and just basically put everything together for us. They were lovely. So next steps for the program, and Scott and Malik, you guys can chime in as well. We are looking to have more frequent RAD aid trips. We are looking for general and pediatric sonographers. And we are, as I said, hoping to have more teaching workshops with the Hashemite University.
Yeah, and I'll just add to this slide. Definitely, like Mona said, trying to get more RAD volunteers. But the good thing about collaborating with SAMS is that there's a ton of roles for people at various stages of their medical training, from students all the way up to attendings. So it's just more volunteers in general to the site would be great.
Yeah, that's a really.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, sorry. Go ahead, Malik.
No, I was just saying, I actually am going, planning a trip in late April. I was originally going to go in October, but given, all the conflict that was going on in the region, they decided to delay. So, yeah, hopefully many missions in the future, and things are changing very rapidly there. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but I imagine that there'll still be a great need for a little while, at least.
Yeah, so thank you for listening to us give this presentation. So the presentation part of this talk is done. So I'm just going to exit out of the content sharing.
I guess it's worth noting that last slide, you could see that Mona, at the end of the trip, you do have, if you want, a couple of days of free time. And a lot of people that went on the mission were able to go and enjoy some sightseeing, visiting the historic, I can't remember what the name of the historic city is, in the rocks.
Petra.
Petra, of course, Petra. And then
Yeah.
obviously going into the desert and kind of spending time there. And from what she told me, she had a great time.
Yeah, that's right. That was actually a really fun part of the trip. Yeah, so after you do the volunteering Zahtari camp workshop bit, you can do SAMS was good in that there was Dr. Jihad. He organizes a little kind of visit Petra, visit Wadi Rum for 2 days. So you get the like touristy extracurricular bits in there too, which is really cool.
And when I went last, I had other educational obligations, but my brother went with me. He's also a radiologist, and he took the time out to actually go to Ed Colts. You can go to Jerusalem if you wanted to. It's not too far away. So yeah, there's lots of options out there from a social standpoint.
Yeah,
All right, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I went to Petra at the start of the trip. I got there like a day early, I think. And it's you can do it in a day trip, or you can sleep overnight. So, but it seemed like it was pretty easy to get around the country, and the group that we went with was so large. There's always, either on the front end of the trip or the back end of the trip, there's always people to try to plan a trip with, if you want to go see one of those sites with some other people. So it was nice.
Yeah. And I just want to add too, if anyone's thinking of volunteering or interested, we do have different routes of possibly getting funding for these kind of missions, depending on kind of the association you're associated with. Like if you are an ultrasound tech, or if you're in radiology, there are grants, there are scholarships. So, which is really nice because yeah, like my flight and my hotel was covered. So other than taking time off from like your work and your personal life, everything else is taken care of. So yeah, so there are those options to keep in mind.
So on that point, I'm sure that's a really important point for a lot of people. Scott, I know you got funding to go. So can you kind of talk about how you were able to secure that?
Yeah, sure. So I was fortunate to get funding on this trip, and also I've been to a trip through RAD to Peru as well, and I did that as a medical student, and I was fortunate enough to get funding for both of those trips. And my experience was pretty much just I had already had a established relationship with RAD, and so that made it a lot easier. I was put into contact with people in RAD that are in charge of allocating grant resources and funding and stuff like that. But I would imagine, even for my first trip to Peru, That was funded as well. And just being in contact with people in RAD as you're going through the process, and just kind of like professionally bringing the topic up in terms of, oh, is, just professionally asking if there's funding available, I think is a great way to try to start that conversation. But yeah, like RAD they're motivated to get people at every level involved. So they're pretty good about granting grants to help defer the costs and stuff like that. Yeah, but it was pretty straightforward. Like after just being plugged in with with someone in RAD, they said, "Oh, there's actually a grant scholarship that's available, and you just need to write up like a page piece detailing your experience there and what you found, what you learned, things of that nature." And they might ask you to present at their annual RAD conference too, which that's fine, and it's a good credit for your CV as well. I'll also say there's funding available through, and I can't remember if this is specific for radiology residents or not, but there's also available funding through Doximity. Uh, they provide, I think they cover the cost. I think it's like $1,000 travel grant. And so I'd actually applied for that, and pretty much everyone I've spoken with other people that have applied for that, and it seems like the success rate's pretty high on that one. But the same responsibilities in terms of, you just write a page or two blurb when you get back about your experience, and so pretty low stakes in terms of applying for that grant as well. So yeah, there are definitely some options out there for funding.
Awesome. And we have, I think, mostly medical students on the chat, and a few residents, and a few M4s who will soon be residents. So that's really important to know. Thank you so much. Is there like any particular person in RAD that we reach out to, or like any particular grant that we apply for?
I feel like my experience was just kind of getting plugged into the program. So I first reached out to Malik, and then after speaking with Malik, I was then put into contact with someone else within RAD. So I feel like, between Malik and Mona, those are
Yeah.
probably the best starting off points for, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can leave my email with you, Zaid, at the end of this, and then Malik as well. And then people can reach out to us, and that's kind of our role, is to kind of see who's interested and then set them up with possible funding and go through all the steps. Yeah,
Excellent. Thank you so much.
for sure.
I'll also say there's also fellowships out there that provide funding. So when I was at University of North Carolina for residency, and I first went, they had one specifically for there, and I know at Hopkins they had for foreign work that people were doing. And also there's a national organization, I think it was called Reed Goldberg or Reader Goldberg, and they give up to $2,000 or so, and so that can go a long way, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of funding bodies out there.
Awesome. I have a list of questions ready, but if anybody in the audience has questions, feel free to chime in and ask. Okay, so I'll ask one of mine. So, we have a bunch of medical students on the chat, and so let's say a medical student comes on a trip. What would be their role once they get to Jordan? What would they do? What would their day-to-day look like?
I think me and Scott can tackle this one. Matt, if you can chime in as well, but because we were there doing the day-to-day and there was a lot of medical students with us. It looked like there was a lot of roles, honestly, just from even bringing in patients, going through their medical history, especially, in Arabic, letting us know kind of a bit of their history, what's going on with them, why are they here, That was helpful. And then based on what we're finding, keeping track in a medical record, even just being in the room with us to kind of just make sure like the scan is going okay, the patient's comfortable, if the patient has any questions. So I'd say the volunteers were heavily involved, doing like multiple different things. Yeah, Scott, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, the only thing I'd add is I felt like, the Jordanian medical students were really, really helpful with patient triage and taking histories for us. And I feel like, that's a huge role that medical students are a lot closer to learning how to do that than I am, in my journey. So I thought they were actually really helpful for history, grabbing history and stuff like that. That's for this specific trip, and there are other trips too in RAD, and hopefully, at some point with uh, the Middle East chapter of RAD too, where medical students can be valuable in terms of um, like helping to come up with the readiness assessment for where like you go to a location and you're trying to figure out does this place have high enough need for the services that RAD could provide? Does this place have um, like some of the infrastructure available? Do they have enough need with patients? And so that was I went on a trip as a medical student doing that in Peru, and never having been in a radiology reading room, I still felt like it was a cool experience being involved with those conversations. And a lot of people, if you end up going on a trip like that, a lot of people in Reddit that I was there, they just appreciated having another set of ears to just uh, just be aware of like the conversations that are being had and stuff like that. So I think medical students they can get involved in like a bunch of different steps throughout in RAD.
Awesome. And so for the residents or the soon to be residents in the room, how is the residents role different, or fellows?
Yeah.
I think you just kind of get more, like you have more direct experience that's relevant for radiology. So, luckily Mona was on the trip and she's way, way more knowledgeable about ultrasound than I am. And so, but the further you get along in your training in radiology, like you'll just have more direct experience. So like, if you're a resident or fellow, you'll feel more comfortable like looking at images or scanning patients or teaching ultrasound skills, things of that nature. But there's still opportunities on trips for performing readiness assessments too. I just think the further along in training you get, the more you feel like you're like doing real radiology work on these trips.
How much interpretive work do you feel like is someone able to do if, like, let's say a senior resident or a fellow or attending goes on a trip?
Um, I mean, a lot, like you can so I don't have a background in scanning patients, just like seeing images. And so, but if you have experience doing that, then you're just limited by the number of patients that you see, really. Um, when when we were in the planning stages of this trip, it was organized so that I would go with Mona, and so so that was perfect for me, not having any hands-on scanning experience. It was great, like, and honestly, like I felt like I was supporting Mona during the trip because she was like super knowledgeable and but plenty of space to like if that's your interest, if you feel comfortable using ultrasound probes and scanning patients, I think we ended up seeing about 40 patients over the course of 2 or 3 days. So yeah, plenty of opportunities to work on those skills, make some diagnoses, see some cool stuff, and teach your skills too to medical students and residents that are interested in learning.
Awesome. And
So,
I remember you.
oh,
Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say when I went previously, I think I saw in terms of volume, probably about was close to about 30 ultrasound patients a day, and then maybe another 10 to 15 X-ray patients a day. And then every day it'd be like 1 or 2 cases would bring in like a mammogram, or they had an outside MRI and they brought in the images for me to look at, or an outside CT. But yeah, there was tons of volume for us, at least from my experience. There were just patients waiting outside the door, ready to get scanned.
And then once you provide the interpretation, like I know you started talking about this, but like what happens then? Let's say a patient needs surgery or needs follow up or needs further imaging. How do you kind of go about that?
So I would, every time I scanned a patient and I had my interpretation, I'd write out my recommendation. A lot of times, in my experience, it was another clinician in the office. We had GI and nephrology when I went on my mission with us, and I would, give that recommendation back to them. And so, sometimes I'd end up doing endoscopy, or the nephrologist would recommend, a lithotripsy if I saw renal calculi, et cetera. And sometimes there were cases where it was something that there wasn't a specialist there with us, and so we would just hand that documentation off to the SAMS staff, like the permanent staff there, and they would basically make a plan for them to get whatever outside imaging needed or treatment. So it kind of depended on where that patient came from to us and where they were going to be headed after, who was with us.
I'm gonna pause and see if anybody in the audience has any questions.
Yeah, I have a question about how exactly you measure your impact or outcomes in these settings, particularly in the context of like writing grants that kind of rely on you reporting that information to continue to get money to fund the program or what you're working on. Like, are you focused on number of patients that you see? And I know like that kind of information is difficult in these settings. So just how do you think about that when you're framing and deciding on what project you're going to run?
So in terms of funding, I would say that we, as the RAD component of the SAMS, these missions, we don't really, personally, I don't really seek funding in terms of, looking for new resources, because like I said, we can't get a CT scanner. SAMS actually had a CT scanner they were trying to place in the clinic, but because of government restrictions from Jordan, they kind of prevented them from doing it. We do have enough ultrasound scanners. They have a fully functioning X-ray machine. And so we're not necessarily working for grants. Whenever SAMS has needs that they fulfill those needs through their grant process. And our main funding issues are, really about making sure the trainees who are coming with us or the technologists have, funding to make their trip, to have lodging. And so far that hasn't been an issue for us to get that funding. And I guess that is an area where we can explore in the future if there are resources we identify that we really do need. And but as of right now, we just kind of keep documentation of how many patients we see and what we're seeing. And if that comes up in the future, then yeah, definitely we'll be happy to apply for those grants.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the audience? All right. So I guess one question for me, we have the ultrasound machines available. Is there any potential for doing procedures while we're there, like ultrasound guided biopsies, drain placements, things of that nature?
So I have asked about that in the past. Unfortunately, within the refugee camp itself, there are restrictions against procedures being done in the camp itself. But of course, like I said, they've done endoscopies and other surgeries. We had ophthalmologists that do et cetera, and they usually do them at offsite. They do them in a clinic or a hospital where they rent, a procedure room for that week. And so if somebody was in IR and was really keen on doing procedures, that's definitely something we could arrange ahead of time with SAMS if we knew like months in it, this person's going to go, and there's going to be a faculty member who can supervise an IR. Definitely can be arranged. And so there's not a limitation from that standpoint if there is strong enough interest.
Awesome. Is there any potential to do work remotely from the United States? Meaning, some of these workshops for the students, for people here in the States, or even like remote interpretation somehow, some way?
So the remote interpretation point, it's kind of difficult. I looked really hard into this. They lack Wi-Fi in the clinic itself. Unfortunately, there would be a process to upload studies, but they'd have to do it off-site. And so after looking at it for a long time, we kind of decided it'd be too difficult. I'm really trying to look into just connecting with SAMS to establish Wi-Fi there. And if we can do that, I think that's a very, a relatively simple process, because we have this larger, I can't remember the name of the company I was speaking to, that works with RAD already in other places to, provide remote reads, like a PAC system. And so that wouldn't be that difficult. But we just have to see with SAMS and see if we can establish Wi-Fi there and get that going. And then the other aspect was the education, you said? Yeah, I mean, we're really building these bridges with the Hashi Med School that Mona and Scott referenced. We every time we go, we do more and more lectures, and we're definitely building strong connections. So I think soon we can definitely start. I mean, I'm going to be going in the spring, hopefully, so I can definitely look into maybe establishing some sort of series of lectures that we can give, their med students or even their residents, for people who are faculty, future faculty that are interested. And that'd be awesome. No question.
Yeah, because Scott and I, when we were together at Columbia, and something we still do at Columbia, we do a lot of like case conferences and lectures for residents in Guyana, and so I think it'd be interesting and wonderful project to do the same for the medical students and residents in Jordan. Kind of like increase their capacity to do radiology work.
No question. Yeah. I mean, they loved when we went there in person. They were ecstatic in my experience, and I'm sure it sounded like for Mona and Scott, it was the same for them. And yeah, they benefited a lot, I think.
Where can people go to find out more about upcoming trips and things of that nature, like upcoming projects?
There's a SAMS website where they upload or they provide information on their upcoming missions, and of course, like we were saying, me and Mona would be happy to provide our contact info. And I'm always talking with SAMS about their upcoming missions, and we'll be happy to pass on all that info. Like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty about the future. If anyone who's been paying attention to the news from literally overnight, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we have any other Syrians in the chat, but it's pretty exciting, change, and hopefully, cautiously optimistic. Hopefully things go well. But even with everything that's happened, there's a strong possibility that Zaptity will still be in place for, a little while until people are able to move back. And they're going to need more help than ever, because I imagine a lot of these countries are going to want to help less and less, for these people. And so, there's going to be a lot of opportunity, especially now, more than ever.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I just want to tag on to what Malik said. So yeah, anyone that's interested, you can send me or Malik an email. That's probably the first best step, and then we can go from there. And then once the dates for the next missions are out, there's a group chat that we have on WhatsApp, which will give all the details, logistics. So reaching us is the first step, and then we kind of can take it from there with you and make it really smooth and simple. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Going once, going twice. Well, this has been really inspiring for me personally. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so regarding reaching out to for more information on the projects, do you want us to send our emails like directly in the chat right now, or like how do we go about that?
I guess like Malik and Mona will give me their emails, and then I can put it in like the Muslims in radiology chat, and we can kind of take it from there. And you can like email them directly.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so you guys have inspired at least one person to come on a trip with you, and myself included, so that's two. So thank you so much. This was very, very helpful. This is very, very inspiring. Of course, we pray for all of our brothers and sisters in Syria and all of those people who are displaced. So thank you again. We'll definitely like keep in touch on future directions, future trips, and hopefully you'll see some of us on those trips and other projects. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Zay. Thank you. Well, and thank you for everyone for participating. You know, obviously there's so much going on, and I really hope we can be a positive impact on in the future of the Muslim world, and you know, especially in Jordan, Syria, and Lebanon. Yeah.
Well said. Thank you everyone for being here today. And yeah, inshallah, we can unite and spread more positivity, as Manik said, in an ever-changing world.
All right. Thank you again. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.